10 Sports in this August 17th, 2023 episode. Glad to have you here with us. It's a big one. It is a big one. It's the one we all been waiting for. I feel like we need to have Ric Flair's intro be coming in here. Boom, 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 ba-dum. South Carolina uses it. It's a big one. We're doing the 2023 SEC predictions, SEC West, SEC East, full breakdown of a schedule. We're not going to be long-winded. I'm going to give you some thoughts. We're going to go through each team's schedule, and I'm going to tell you what they're going to be in their overall 12 game and what they're going to be in their conference record as well. Then I'm going to give you my CFP, my college football playoff predictions, my 4 teams, who I think advances to Atlanta for the national championship, and who will be hoisting up the trophy to win the national championship. Before we get there, we'll also have a guest. Before we get started, Chris Phillips from the Spurs Up Show will be joining us to give us a little context of what's going on out in Columbia, what's going on from a standpoint of South Carolina camp. Shoot him over that email before we eventually get started. Send that over to Chris. Perfect. All right, we're ready to rock and roll here, guys. So we're going to get to SEC predictions, SEC West, SEC East, full SEC predictions. Then I'll end up telling you who's going to be hoisting the trophy in Houston. I apologize. I mentioned Atlanta earlier, and it just hit me. The national championship is in Houston. It's in Atlanta the next year for the first 12-team playoff. But let's get right to it. Like I said, it's the day we've been waiting for. But first, just wanted to quickly, before we get Chris on here, go over the Mississippi State uniforms. If you have not seen them, I'm about to share them to you. They should be the regular uniforms. I really like these uniforms. As the kids say these days, they're fire. They really are. I mean, these uniforms are definitely not mid. They are awesome uniforms. Taking you back to the Jackie Sherrill days. That's really what it is, and I am pulling it up right here for you. As you can see, this is from Mississippi State's football Twitter account. Right here. I mean, look, these are the old school. If you're a diehard Mississippi State fan, diehard SEC fan, you remember these in 1990, in the 90s with Jackie Sherrill. I mean, these uniforms scream Pork Chop Womack, Wayne Madkin, Fred Smoot, Dante Walker, guys like that. That's what this uniform screams. And we got other angles in this picture. Yes, the Miss.State with the Mississippi State logo on the sleeves. I like it. The old school SEC logo. I know those were Nike uniforms. Now you see the Adidas patch up there in the top right of the image. But I think these should be the full-time uniforms. I mean, I don't know how many logos Mississippi State has. They have different ones, like for all different sports. They use the Miss State for basketball. They have their MS for baseball. And they had the M State they used for the logo for a while. But, I mean, look at the full uniform here. That's a nice uniform. That's a clean-looking Mississippi State uniform. I think this picture right here kind of explains it. The helmet. This is an awesome uniform. I know Brandon Langwall. He's the SID at Mississippi State. One of my best friends from high school. He was his fraternity brother. Me and my buddy from Alabama would drive over to state and have a blast with those guys. He's the SID Sports Information Director. If you don't know, that is at Mississippi State now. I'm going to text him after the show. This has to be the full uniform. I do not know why this would not be Mississippi State's full-time uniform. This is nasty. I mean, the black little bar right on the sleeve. How are we not going to this full-time? If I'm a Mississippi State fan, I'm up in arms. Why are we not? I'm calling the AD. We're using this uniform. We're using this uniform. This is much better than anything they've done in the past 25 years from a uniform standpoint. And I feel like they've changed it up a lot, but it was in their pocket the whole time we've had this. Just pick up the phone, call Jackie Sherrill. He would have told you to wear this uniform. Again, I'm probably being way too fanish about it, but I like this uniform. I've texted my Mississippi State buddies. They sent me, hey, my buddy Richard Matisse out there. I sent it to him. He's like, asking if he was going to get his 1998 Mississippi State gear, and he said, hey, you don't have to get ready you don't have to get gear if you're already ready. He had his old school 98 stuff he used to wear. Just a fantastic uniform. This should be the full-time uni. But before we get Chris on here, I just want to talk about one more thing. Lane Kiffin, talking a little bit about culture during a recent appearance if you've been watching the SEC Network, the Marty and McGee show have had the SEC coaches on from SEC Media Day. So this is where this quote from. But Lane Kiffin was asked, how has he evolved as a head coach involving the transfer portal? And he had a pretty brutally honest response here. Quote, I think kind of accepting that you're going to not have a phenomenal culture, Kiffin said, according to On3. Doesn't mean I don't work on it, but I think I have to realize, like, hey, it just is what it is. Like, one, we don't have many kids who are dying to be here. They didn't grow up wanting to go to Ole Miss. These transfer kids are going to a place that fits them best at the time. It's not about the school, and you don't really have them on their third, fourth, or fifth year with you to know how they want to do it. They know expectations, the culture, and other players. Unfortunately, now it's just plug and play. What I do appreciate about Kiffin's honesty here, he's always honest. I mean, you go back to his podium talk at the SEC Media Days, guys, as brutally honest as it gets. He's right. He's 100% right. I don't think Kiffin really likes to play in the transfer portal. I think he thinks it raises their floor a little bit. That's to be determined yet. I don't think there's enough data out there to determine if the transfer portal dabbling in that as much as Ole Miss has. I mean, they're still bringing guys on a week and a half, 2 weeks ago into the roster. If it really works, but I appreciate his honesty on most topics, and he's right here. Culture, you're going to give up a little bit of culture if you're going to go dabble in the transfer portal pretty often year to year. But why say that? Why say, yeah, there's a culture issue, guys don't want to be here? I mean, I'm looking at it again. He admits to working on it, but kids just aren't dying to be here. The kids are just coming here for a fit for themselves. I don't know. I mean, in today's society, everything gets out so quickly. I don't know if I really want one of my – maybe it doesn't matter. One of the parents of a potential transfer portal kid or high school kid saying, hey, I mean, the head coach is quoted on an SEC Network show at SEC Media Day saying their culture's bad. Kids don't really want to be in Oxford, at Ole Miss. What is that saying about your program? I just don't know. I don't think it's necessary to go out there. You don't have to pull the curtain back that much, Lane. What he's saying, it's not about what he's saying. That's 100% factual. You do give up a ton of your culture. Your players don't really know each other's names. I've heard under the radar at an Ole Miss after practice, post-game press conference, some of the defensive guys didn't even know who some of the other defensive guys were. And how is that going to work from 11 guys communicating? Because people forget, man, the communication, especially on defense in the back end, is so key. But the point being, a lot of these guys just don't build that camaraderie of, hey, guys, we've been here since our freshman year. This is what it's about. These are the expectations. If you come to Ole Miss, this is what we're about. There's not a lot of team-led – it doesn't allow a lot of team-led activities or, hey, for Ole Miss this year, their first 2 conference games at Alabama and LSU comes to town. You start off 0-2. Who on that roster is really bringing the team together? Because, hey, Johnny Joe's a good corner, but I don't really know him that well. I'm not really comfortable enough to go tell him, hey, man, let's step it up, man. We're giving a lot of yards through the air. We're scoring 42 points. Not pointing the blame at you, but come on, man, let's carry the weight. I don't really know how that guy responds to criticism like that. It may go the wrong way and to make even more separation within the locker room. I think that's a big concern. I mean, like I said, that's real. They go at Alabama and open their first 2 conference games are at Alabama and at LSU. Odds are Vegas is telling us most people are going to say Ole Miss is going to start off 0-2 in conference. Well, normally teams aren't winning the West with 2 losses, especially in conference. I mean, it happened last year with LSU, but it usually doesn't happen, especially in your first 2 conference games. You start off 0-2. No one's ever won the West doing that. So a lot of your aspirations, goals, championship aspirations and goals, whatever you may call them, are out the window before middle of October. Like, who's keeping that team together? I mean, again, Kiffin is not wrong. Just thought he brought up a real interesting point. He's just almost too brutally honest. And again, I appreciate it. I like how he talks about NIL. College football is the only sport where it's free agency every year. People are not playing through contracts. There's no multi-year contracts. It's just year to year now. Like Quinshon Judkins, he's only going to be a sophomore this year. He goes and has a big time. I was talking to my dad about it. He goes and has a big time year this year. He's going to come back to the bank and, hey, this is what I did. I mean, I know you're paying me $800,000 right now. I want a little more. Let's get up to $1 million. I got 1 more year and I haven't used my transfer. He could say adios, amigos. See you later, Grove Collective. I'm going to go take my talents to Auburn. going to take it to Auburn. I'm from Alabama. I'm from Montgomery. I'm going to go to Alabama. They lose some running backs after this year. Stuff like that. He's not wrong. He's not wrong in regards to stuff like that. But I just thought it was interesting. Almost a little too open. Stuff I usually appreciate him saying. Sometimes he's too open, whether it's about, hey, I don't even remember that kid's name, or, man, our culture's bad. It's just sometimes you don't always have to say what you really think. But, again, that's what makes Lane Kiffin Lane Kiffin. There's no filter. But speaking of, we are finishing up this segment at a perfect time. Our guy, Chris Phillips, is hopping on right now. Let's get him on right now. Chris, you there, brother?
What's going on, Dave? Great to see you, brother. What's up?
What's going on, man? Can you hear me?
Test. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, brother. I appreciate you hopping on, man.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate you having me. I wanted to update you, by the way. Our conversation, folks have been asking, it will drop Monday. For all those out there wondering, we're going to kick off. We got a week full of interviews. Yours truly. We're putting a pin in our preseason content tomorrow, which I could not be happier, Dave, because I'm so ready to talk about an actual football game on the field. It's killing me. So we'll put a pin in that. Tomorrow, all next week, I'll be out of town. We're dropping interviews every single day on our podcast, and yours will be one of them, man. So for everybody listening in who loves Mock Tim Sports and loves Dave Shoemate, you can hear us chattering, talking about college football on Monday. It'll drop 5 a.m. Eastern. I'll throw up the link, obviously, and I'll tag you and everything. But I appreciate you having me, man. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, and looking forward to talking ball.
It's a blast. So I was on with you a couple of weeks ago, man. We had a good conversation. Wanted to bring you on. But again, we got Chris Phillips here from the Spurs Up Show. You can listen, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, live Monday through Friday, 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern time zone for us Central Standard Time Zone people on here on YouTube. Also, give him a follow on X or Twitter, whatever you still call it, at the Spurs Up Show. Chris, what's going on, baby? You're in Greenville, right?
Yeah, I'm in Greenville, South Carolina. I've spent the last 3 years before that in Columbia, South Carolina. So I got to the upstate around last July, if you will, and just wanted to change things up a bit. You know, obviously doing the business digitally. I've been doing this full time since August of 2019. It's one of those deals where, you know, I wanted to take advantage of unique flexibility and kind of get into a different city and kind of exploring different things. And who knows where we'll go next. But yeah, I'm in the upstate right now and really loving it. You know, it's nice when South Carolina wins. You don't see quite as much orange and purple walking around as maybe you would otherwise. I was, I mean, we're about 30 minutes from Clemson, and I was told that when I moved here, it was going to be, you know, just nothing but Clemson fans, Clemson takeover. And I don't really feel like it's been that bad. And again, maybe it's because South Carolina won the game last year. So maybe I picked the perfect time to jump up here. But no, my sister lives about 10 minutes away. One of my good buddies about 20 minutes. And yeah, it's been a great thing, man. So I really enjoy it.
Well, perfect. So just getting right to it. What are just 2-3 things that have just stood out to you so far during this fall camp, preseason camp, what people call it, in Columbia, South Carolina, heading into Shane Beamer's third season?
Yeah, Dave, I mean, I think the first thing is the comments from Spencer Rattler on the new offense, and hearing him yesterday actually say that, you know, there's been no adjustment period. He feels like there's been no growing pains. They've had more explosive plays. And I'll say, Dave, that I'm one of those that I take everything we hear right now with a bit of a grain of salt, right? Because it's best shape of my life season. It's everybody's undefeated, right? Nobody's thrown an interception. Nobody's fumbled the football. Nobody's lost a game yet, right? So everybody's going to go undefeated. Everybody's going to win a title. But hearing Spencer Rattler say that about Dowell Loggins' offense, when that's obviously the number one question mark going into the season, and I tell you this, Dave, Spencer Rattler, we got to get away from this idea that he's going to be this flawless, perfect quarterback, this mistake-free quarterback. Because when he's playing his game, I mean, that's not who he is. It's why I've said many times this offseason that Clemson game at the end of last season, Dave, I think is the perfect representation of what he is. He's a gunslinger, and he takes risks, and sometimes he pays for it, like throwing a pick six or throwing an interception in the red zone. But other times, hey, you take that bad so you get that good. A 72-yard bomb to Juice Wells, a 4th and goal where he throws a dart in the back of the end zone and hits his guy. You know, a 2nd and goal where he puts his shoulder down and he sacrifices his body and gets the touchdown. For Spencer Rattler, the thing I'm most worried about and the thing I most want out of the offense is for him to be comfortable. And so when he's saying things like, you know, there's no adjustment period or there's been no growing pains and, you know, I'm just out there playing loose, having fun, like that means to me, Dave, that he's comfortable, and a comfortable Spencer Rattler is a dangerous Spencer Rattler. It's not a perfect Spencer Rattler, but it's a dangerous Spencer Rattler, more of what we saw end of last season versus those first 10 games, if you will. Other than that, Dave, unfortunately, the number one thing we follow right now, I guess, is the injury report and making sure guys seeing who's going to be available week one, who's not. Is somebody missing practice, what have you, trying to read between the lines of that. Hearing the reports on Nicholas Harbor have been very interesting. I'm someone that came into this season with very realistic expectations for him. I think anywhere between 20 to 25 catches would be a massive success. And from what we've heard in fall camp, I think there's good reason why, because he's having a time adjusting to college football and playing specifically wide receiver at the SEC level. So it's one of those things where he's a great track guy. He's a freakish athlete, but can he adjust to the speed of the college game and playing that position? I mean, Dave, just because you're big and you're fast doesn't make you an elite wide receiver. So learning the route running, learning the technique, learning the skill set. It's been interesting to hear how he's getting acclimated and adjusting, but I fully expect this coaching staff to find creative ways to get him the football. And I mean, other than that, defensive players spoke yesterday. For those of us that are the diehards of South Carolina and reading, individual players, what they're saying, I think there's some interesting things there. I am excited for Travian Robertson, the new defensive line coach, and hearing Jatius Gear talk about how, the new scheme is allowing the edge guys to play more free and fast and use their athleticism. And I think what's going to be fascinating this year is that Travian Robertson, while at South Carolina, was coached by the late, great Brad Lawing. And for those who don't know who Brad Lawing is, one of the most legendary defensive line coaches, not just at South Carolina, but I mean, he coached at FSU under Jimbo Fisher, coached at Michigan State under Nick Saban. This is a guy that spent a long time coaching in college football, and again, one of the best to ever do it. So Travian Robertson taking what he learned from Brad Lawing, applying that. This guy, before he was hired at South Carolina, was a rising star in the assistant coaching ranks. He spent time at Georgia State under Sean Elliott, was at Tulane. Obviously, we saw what Tulane did last year and preseason ranked this year. So I'm excited to see what that defensive line is going to be for South Carolina, because it's been such a problem area for them, especially stopping the run, but also just getting after the quarterback. And I think they should be improved there. But, out of Columbia, that's pretty much it, Dave. Outside of that, I would say, the quarterback battle in Tuscaloosa is fascinating. LSU's getting into a fight here and there, and sounds like they're ready to go. And, obviously Peyton Thorne winning the job at Auburn. So some other tidbits coming out, things out of Kentucky camp, the buzz is building there. So, all across the SEC, Dave, tis the season where everybody's undefeated, everybody feels good, and, let a couple of weeks go by, and I think reality will start to set in really, really quickly for some teams out there.
No, and I'm glad you hit on the SEC. I'm gonna go down on one of my questions here real fast. Now you hit on it. What's a team or two? However, what's a team you're buying? What's a team you're selling right now in the Southeastern Conference heading into 23?
Yeah, Dave, I think we talked about
outside of South Carolina.
For sure. No, for sure. I'm eliminating South Carolina. That felt a little bit too easy. And I'm buying stock in Kentucky. I really am. And it started for me back at SEC Media Days. And that was the first time, I'd kind of glanced over Kentucky's roster, but that was the first time I really stopped and looked at, where they won in the portal, what they picked up and what they returned. And, you start to get on the list and you're like, man, Devin Leary, he was a really good quarterback at NC State. I'm not sure anybody in the SEC really knows how good of a quarterback this guy was and is. The addition of Liam Cohen, bringing him back as OC, like the last time Kentucky was clicking was when Liam Cohen was there in Lexington calling the shots. You look at the wide receiver room with Barry and Brown and Dane Key, and I think that's the best group of receivers they've ever had under Mark Stoops. You pick up Ray Davis from the transfer portal, who, by the way, was a 1,000-yard rusher at Vanderbilt. So I feel like that there should be an asterisk next to that, because that's even more impressive. You're at Vandy, and you were probably being keyed in as the top guy. You still ran for 1,000 yards there. Demi Sumo, the kid they picked up from NC State as well. The offensive line, they got to figure that out, right? But they really hammer the portal. Picked up a transfer from Alabama, picked up a transfer from Southern Cal, amongst a couple of others. And then defensively, I fully expect the defense to be just that stingy, hard-nosed, tough physicality, Mark Stoops trademark that we all know and love, right? I think Octavius Oxendine leading it up there in the front seven. And, I don't know. I think Kentucky was a team, Dave, I was already expecting them to be a 7 or 8 win team, but I started to look at them at SEC Media Days and look down the roster, and I said, this is a team that could really pop off. Like, this is a team, I'm not picking it necessarily, but this is a team I think high end could be the second best team in the SEC East. Like, I think they could finish ahead of Tennessee. And I think lately, and I think as we get closer to the season, you're seeing a lot more people buy in on that. But here's the thing. Kentucky won 7 games last year, and their offensive line was abysmal. There's no way under Mark Stoops their offensive line is that bad again. So I'm buying Kentucky. I'm selling the Auburn Tigers, not in the sense of I think they're going to go 2-10 or 3-9. I think there's a lot of hype out there, speaking on Auburn in regards to, being a 9-win team. Their fans are really running wild with the Hugh Freeze thing, and the freeze has hit the plains, if you will. But hearing Hugh Freeze again speak at media days and plead for patience from his fan base, that just jumped out to me. I think Auburn is going to be. They could be a problem against some big teams this year and be really stingy, and maybe not a team you look forward to playing. But I think 6-6 should probably be looked at by Auburn fans as a really good year this year. When you look at what he took over, and again, I know he's crushing in recruiting. They really, really hammered the portal. I mean, major winners in the portal. But I just think it's going to take some time for Hugh Freeze. I know he's always had these quick turnarounds, but in the SEC, it's a little bit different. I know he did things at Ole Miss, what have you, and, of course, his record against Nick Saban. There's a lot of reasons to feel confident in Hugh Freeze, but for year one, I'm selling the Auburn Tigers. If I had to go another one, though, because I feel like that one, I've talked about that one a lot. If I had to go one more, Dave, give you a bonus pick here, I am selling Florida. I just – Graham Mertz at quarterback. And I don't think Billy Napier is a bad coach, but Jimmy's and Joe's, man. Jimmy's and Joe's. And it's weird to say that because I'm so used to and so accustomed to Florida having those guys. I just don't know they have enough of them this year, man. I love what they have at running back, right, with Johnson and Etienne. They've got a great 1-2 punch. But if Graham Mertz has to go out there and make plays, what tells us he can do that? And the defense was abysmal last year. I like Austin Armstrong, their 29-year-old defensive coordinator, but they were just horrific defensively. So I just don't know where the answers come from for Florida. They got a really brutal schedule. I've got the Gators going 5-7. Is that a little bit harsh? Maybe, but I mean, the Vegas over-under's 5.5, which feels so weird to say. Florida's one of those teams, Dave, I just have no idea because it would not stun me if they went 7-5. It wouldn't stun me if they went 5-7 and lost to Vandy again, and maybe they finished 7th and Vandy finished 6th. I mean, it's really – there's that much volatility when it comes to the Florida Gators. So it's going to be a wild year in the SEC, man, because speaking of volatility, there are so many teams that you could use that word for. I mean, outside of really Georgia, LSU, and Bama, who I think we know what those teams are, everybody else, best of luck guessing at this point.
No, I mean, hitting on all your points, Kentucky. I mean, this is our prediction episode here at Mock 10 Sports. So we go over the whole SEC, East, West. It's crazy. You said Kentucky. I may surprise some people with my pick with Kentucky. It's like you said, if they stay healthy, they legitimately can win 9 games this year. Now, tough draw.
Look at the way their schedule sets up. I mean, it sets up for them to start like 6-0. I mean, it just you have to look at those things when you're making the predictions, right? And you look at momentum and when teams play certain teams. I saw somebody phrase it beautifully the other day. I might butcher it, but I'm going to paraphrase it. They said, picking win-loss, it's not about just how much talent you have. It's about how much talent you have relative to how difficult your schedule is. That's what it comes down to. So not all schedules are built the same. That's why some teams go 12-0 and they play in the AAC. And if they put in the SEC, it'd be a lot different. You wouldn't look at them the same, but it is what it is. So, I mean, not
look at Cincinnati a couple years ago.
Right, right, exactly. That's why the AP Top 25, honestly, is a lot of crap a lot of times because it's just like there's teams in the top 25 that it's like, listen, I'm glad college football, it's not just the SEC or the ACC or the Big Ten, but like sometimes when you look at like UCF's like 12th, it's like, come on, man. We know for a fact UCF is not actually the 12th best team in the entire country, but it's the nature of the beast, I guess.
No, and then to your point with Auburn, I 100% could see somebody selling Auburn. So you said you're not saying they're going to be bad, but like you said, they're a few injuries away just due to lack of depth or not being very good. And I feel like that's something I was talking to a buddy today on the phone. When we're making these preseason predictions, and it sounds weird because nobody wants to go out there and predict injuries. Like, nobody wants to be like, oh, Spencer Rattler, I'm predicting game 4. He goes and tears his ACL. It's like, what kind of basis you? But it's like you said, your depth. I always kind of say it's about your top 40, not your first 22, which that's why I think the West with LSU is so interesting. But then to your point, finally with Florida, it's like you said, all their talent's young. I mean, you mentioned it. Not specifically, but outside of Ricky Pearsall, outside they got a bunch of young cats like Andy Jean or Eugene Wilson that's going to have to step up to help Graham Mertz. Then you're replacing 4 starters on an offensive line. It wasn't that great either. it's like you said, the schedule's tough. I mean, they're 2 non-conference games they can easily lose between at Utah and then Florida State. Like that hurts. So it's I'm with you there. But
I mean, Dave,
back to
I was just going to say, you mentioned the dreaded I word, man. It's one of those things like we're not going to sit here and make predictions based off of, well, I think this team's going to get hurt or worse than this team. Like that's not a reason you're going to make predictions, but there's a difference, like you mentioned, there's a difference in a football team. A team like an LSU or obviously the Georgias, the Bamas, but even like a Texas A&M where it's like you pick a certain record and you're like, hey, I not only like their starting 22, but I like their depth. Then there's other teams that are held together by Scotch tape. And it's like, dude, if they get one injury at the wrong spot, and it doesn't have to be season ending. Like if they have a guy miss a game, it might cost them a ball game, right? So, I mean, I look at South Carolina and a lot of different position units they have. I mean, there are certain places on their football team you just can't afford an injury. And you have to just cross your fingers and hope and pray. And, because a lot of times you can't predict it. Guy get his leg rolled up on or whatever happens. And, the rest is history. So it's one of those things you don't want to predict it and you hope you don't have to factor it in. But as you say, Dave, it's just inevitable, man. It's football.
And Chris, circling back to the Gamecocks here, what is kind of your best case, worst case scenario for the Gamecocks, you think, this year?
So I'll start, Dave, with the worst case. I'm going to say worst case 5-7. And when I say worst case, I mean, I really just think everything went wrong. There might be an injury, like a quarterback. Yeah, I mean, it really, and when I say best case, worst case too, I'm talking realistic best case, worst case, right? I mean, anybody can say 12-0 or 0-12. So these are realistic scenarios that I think could actually happen. Again, 5-7 for me, worst case. You lose the majority of your swing games. Maybe you get upset by a Vanderbilt or a team you should not lose to, and you stumble down the stretch. And all of those things that broke for you in Shane Beamer's first 2 years, they go against you, right? Is that going to happen? I don't think so. Is it likely to happen? I don't think so. Now, Dave, where I lose people is my best case scenario, because my best case scenario is a little bit more conservative than some others. I've got 8-4 as the best case. Most will list 9-3. They will tell you 9-3. This is the way I look at it, Dave. You break this thing down in wins, toss-ups, and losses. And I don't have the graphic pulled up right in front of me. But for South Carolina to get a 9-3, Dave, you realize they would basically have to win every toss-up game they have. And it's just that's just not realistic, man. Like you're not going 6-0 in the coin flip games. You'll be lucky to go 4-2. You should be grateful to go 4-2, right? So, and I look at South Carolina, Dave, and I looked at what I said last year. Last year, my best case scenario was 8-4. Admittedly, I think last year's team, at least going into the season, had less question marks than this one. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, how can I say this team with more question marks and a harder schedule has a higher ceiling than that team had last year, right? So could they get to 9-3 if the stars aligned? Maybe, but for me, a more realistic best case scenario is that 8-4 regular season. Because I just, again, there's just no way you're going to go through this entire schedule, this entire season, and win every single swing game you have. To get to 8-4, you're going to have to win one or two that you will 100% be an underdog in Vegas. So, and I think most Gamecock fans have a firm grasp on 8-4 again would be a fantastic season. But yeah, Dave, for me, worst case 5-7, best case 8-4, and I see those as very realistic best case and worst case scenarios for South Carolina.
Chris, and pulling a little bit some of the layers back on the South Carolina staff here. Obviously, Montario Hardesty going into his third year as the running backs coach in Columbia. And that's kind of a position that lacks some depth. I mean, DeCarrion Joyner right now, correct me if I'm wrong, he's going to be the starter. He's going to be RB1 heading into that first game in Charlotte against North Carolina. What is kind of the thoughts, like your personal thoughts, and you kind of thoughts around Gamecock Nation of what kind of job is he doing there? Do you think there's some improvement there? Is it his fault that the running back room? I know Marshawn Lloyd left, but what's your kind of thoughts on that? As we kind of get into a position group, it's a little thin, but it's going to have a big say in how good South Carolina ultimately can they get to that 8 wins, that ceiling you discussed.
Mm-hmm. Dave, you had to go there, man. You had to go there about Montario Hardesty, man. I'll say this: Gamecock Nation is not exactly thrilled with the job he's done and the performance of the running back position specifically. I tell you this, though, what he can do to win a lot of favor over next Wednesday, August 23rd, there's a young man by the name of Daniel Hill, a 4-star running back that is making his announcement. He's got South Carolina, Alabama, a couple others on his short list, but it feels like it's going to come down to South Carolina or Bama They land him, and I think you feel like, okay, maybe things are trending the right direction because it's felt as if Daniel Hill is a big-time dude. It could be a game changer for you, come in and immediately, make some big plays and compete for the starting job, if you will. But, Dave, this year, certainly, I mean, the running back position is a major question mark. And I'll say this on the positive starting there. DeKerryon Joyner is going to be this team's starting running back going into UNC. And the reports out of fall camp, I mean, they've raved about this kid, right? Athleticism and speed and agility, and it's a natural fit. It's something that should have been done years ago. Like we mentioned, Dave, let's take it with a grain of salt, though, right? This is a guy that played wide receiver the last couple of years. He's never played running back before, right? Then you've got Juju McDowell, who's more of a scat back. You've got Mario Anderson, who they picked up out of the portal, a Division II transfer. And then you got Dontavius Braswell, who I'm actually really high on. And I think if anybody in this room is going to pop, taking nothing away from DeKerryon Joyner and everybody else, I think DJ Braswell probably has the most upside because, well, he's actually, Dave, a true running back. He played running back in high school when he was a four-star player in his own right. So I think DeKerryon Joyner, I tell you, Dave, there's not a player on this roster that I'm more fascinated to watch than DeKerryon Joyner. Just because this is a dude that fans have clamored for him to get the ball more over the last couple of years. He's finally going to get the opportunity. Like he's a feature dude, right? It's no secret. You're going to be the guy, your RB1 going into week 1 against UNC. I think the big question is simply, Dave, just how they handle the running back room. Is it going to be a situation where they're going to try to let DK win the job and take over his RB1, get bulk of the carries? Or are they going to be running back by committee and ride the hot hand? And I think that's what's probably more likely because, again, as high a hopes as we all have, I think you have to keep expectations realistic and just say, like, if it was that easy to play running back, Dave, why couldn't Jaheim Bell do it? Like, correct. He wasn't a very good running back, but he's a great athlete. So, I mean, what's going to make DeKerryon Joyner win at running back versus somebody else? So, I think it's going to be one of those situations, and it comes down to the offensive line, too. We could talk about running back that we're blue in the face, but the offensive line's got to open some holes. With that being said, Dave, I don't know that there's really, truly this year an SEC caliber RB1 on this roster. I think there's a lot of supporting cast guys. I think there's a bunch of RB2s and RB3s, and, maybe you can makeshift the running game and you can win with that. You can manufacture something, but certainly it's one of the biggest question marks. I think if not the biggest question mark when it comes to position units on South Carolina's roster. And it's just going to be fascinating to see how it plays out and what Dowell Loggins does to scheme around it or build them into the scheme that he's building for South Carolina.
No, you're right. And always go to the last question. And again, I appreciate you joining us here. Chris Phillips from the Spurs Up Show does a great job in South Carolina covering the Gamecocks. But Chris, to your point about the transition to running back, if you're not a full-time running back, you didn't play it full-time in high school. Jay Graham, when I was at Texas A&M, he was the running backs coach at Florida State with Jimbo. Remember, they signed Cam Akers, and Cam Akers is from Clinton, Mississippi. He played quarterback at a high school where it came down to Alabama, Georgia, Florida State, Jay Graham, and them signed him. He was telling me, because I asked him when he first got there, I was like, how was Cam Akers his first year? He even said to me, he's like, and he essentially played Wildcat quarterback. And then, in high school, you get the ball, try to get the ball to your best players as much as possible. And I don't blame the high school coaches for that. But he was like, man, it took him a full year. By the end of the year, probably about the Florida game, where he got the footwork down. He knew where the holes were going to open up, stuff like that. He's like, it's not just an easy transition. People think you can just throw anyone back there. And it's like, all right, man, just run forward, get vertical there, do what you got to do. It's like, not at this level, not at the Power 5, the ACC, how it was back then, the SEC, obviously now. It's like you said, there's a learning curve between what footwork and stuff, how many you take a full step, half step to get your shoulder square so you can either go hit the A or B gap. As you know, there's a transition. We talked about it, but like I said, last question before we get out of here. I'll put you on the spot again here, not Montario Hardesty type question, but if you said Shane Beamer had to win one game this year, let's just say the Gamecocks go 6-6, 7-5 this year. They're a game under or two from what they were last year. What is that one game that you think South Carolina fans are like, man, if we win this game, but we go 6-6, 7-5, I'm taking it, man. I got a couple in my head that come to mind, but I'm interested to see what you have to say about that.
Well, I mean, Dave, the low-hanging fruit is Clemson. I mean, that's just – I mean, that's a game, man, and fans on both sides feel this way where your team can go 1-11, but if that one is against the arch rival, like a lot of people label the season as a success, right? So, I mean, I'm not one of those people, but that's certainly the low-hanging fruit. I think Missouri is obviously one fans really. That
was the one I was going to go with, just to get that monkey off your back.
Yeah, I mean, it's just – here's the thing, Dave. It's even if you go 8-4, right? And last year I kind of looked silly because – before the season, I labeled Missouri as the most important game of the season. I went as far, Dave, as to say you cannot have a successful season if you lose to Mizzou. Well, I mean, you went 8-4 and you beat Tennessee and you beat Clemson. And, I think most of us would look at last year and call it a success. But you look at this year, like if you lose to Missouri again and you have a 5-game losing streak, it's really hard to justify you're making the type of progress that you want to sell to people that you are making when you have a 5-game losing streak to Mizzou. And it's all due respect, but like, dude, Mizzou hasn't been world beaters. They've been a 500 team under Eli Drinkwitz, yet they own South Carolina. So that's one of those. And Gamecock fans will never admit that, Mizzou's a better football team or, God forbid, a better football program. Gamecock fans will still say, these guys beat us every year, but we're still better than them. Well, unfortunately, that's not how football works. You have to go beat them and prove it that you're better than them. The game for me this year, Dave, that I look at as the most important game in the sense of, I've changed my tune a bit since last year. I learned my lesson. But the game, I think, for South Carolina, if they are going to maximize their potential of the season, they've got to win this game, is the home date against Florida. That one for me, because I look at things like SEC East hierarchy. Florida's down and out right now. They're not going to be down and out forever. Look at the way Billy Napier's recruiting, right? Whether it's he coaching that talent or somebody else, Florida's going to be back. You got to be able to take advantage of the Gators while they're down. Move up that SEC East ladder, that SEC ladder, if you will. It's a game at home coming off a bye week. It's following the really tough 5-game stretch to open the season with UNC, Furman, Georgia, Mississippi State, and Tennessee. You might be going in that game 2-3. You might be going in that game 3-2. Either way, though, that one, Dave, serves to me as a must-win game for South Carolina to spark that second half, if you will. Following Florida, you're going to have to go to Mizzou, to A&M, and then it softens up with that 4-game homestand. But, there's different answers to your question, right? From the fan perspective, purely the fanatical perspective, what's the one game you want to win? Clemson. When I look at the schedule, what's the one game I think South Carolina needs to win in order to, again, reach their full potential or at least have the opportunity to do so? It's that Florida game. I don't think it's North Carolina. Like, losing to North Carolina would be a blow, and I think it'd make a lot of people reset expectations. But, Dave, to say the season's lost if you lose that game, look at what Shane Beamer and South Carolina have done over the last couple of years and the way that they've caught fire end of season. This schedule literally sets up. It is conducive to a late season run, especially if you steal one at Mizzou, at A&M. Then you got 4 straight at home. You get Kentucky at home. You get Clemson at home, and you feel like Jacksonville State and Vandy should be W. So, I mean, you could close out this season winning 5 of your last 6. So I don't think winning week 1 or losing week 1, it doesn't define your season. It is a big game. It's a tone setter, but it doesn't define your season. But that game right there, smack dab in the middle against Florida, that's one. I think either way, Dave, you're probably coming off a loss at Tennessee. You're looking for a win. You're hungry for a win. You lose that one on your home field, I think it could start to get sideways really, really quickly, especially when you think the next week is that game at Mizzou. You need some confidence going in that one if you're going to snap that streak, in my opinion. So I'd label that Florida game, in my opinion, as the most important swing game that South Carolina needs to capture.
Yeah, I knew you wouldn't take the low-hanging fruit with Clemson. Knew you'd read between the lines there. So I appreciate the Florida answer. But, dude, I also appreciate you joining the show, man. I appreciate you taking the time, getting on. Again, Chris Phillips here from the Spurs Up Show. Catch him live Monday through Friday, 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern. Also, give him a follow at the Spurs Up Show. Chris, appreciate you getting on, man.
Dave, you're the man. I appreciate it. Anytime.
Appreciate it, man. Have a good vacation.
Yep.
All right, guys. Chris Phillips, if you want any South Carolina news, SEC in general, does a fantastic job. Again, give him the follow at Spurs Up Show. Does a great job. Does a real great job. But it's time. It's time. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, cue in the Ric Flair song. Speaking of Chris Phillips, South Carolina plays it all the time. Do, 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 do. It's prediction time, guys. It's prediction time. We are starting in the SEC West. And we're going to have our good friends from FBS Schedules be my graphic today. We go through each team's schedule starting in the SEC West. Let me share that screen for you. And we will get it up. And you will see it starting first. We're going to go 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Starting, here we go. Leading us off, the Ole Miss Rebels coming in At 6-6 and 2-6, I think Ole Miss starts off 1-0, obviously getting the win against the Mercer Bears. I think this Tulane game's a little overhyped. I think Ole Miss is going to go in there. I think that's kind of a statement game for them. I think you got Chris Pratt back at quarterback. They lost a ton on defense, Tulane. Everybody's hyping them up after they beat USC in the Cotton Bowl last year. But I think Ole Miss gets them. There'll be a ton of powder blue, red, navy blue, whatever the heck people are wearing in New Orleans that weekend. I think Ole Miss wins this one. A sneaky game, but I'm not ready to say they're going to lose this, is Georgia Tech the next week, because it's sandwiched in between their big, I think, non-conference game they'll be looking forward to at Tulane, and then at Alabama, the first conference game. Heads up, Brent Key and the boys are going to come in motivated. I do think Ole Miss gets the win there. So I think the Rebs are going to start off 3-0. I think at Alabama, it's going to be a loss. LSU comes to town. I think that's going to be a loss. You're starting off 0-2. I mentioned at the beginning of the episode. How is this transfer portal-led team going to bounce back when essentially all your championship goals and aspirations are out the door after September 30th? We're starting October 1st. We just got through the first month of the season and got the Razorbacks coming to town in a must-win situation. I do think the Rebs get that done at home, 1-2. They're heading into the bye week. At Auburn, the Hugh Freeze Bowl. Lane Kiffin better win this one. He better win this one. At Auburn, though, I'm going to give a win to Auburn and Hugh Freeze. I think Auburn gets that. I think Auburn gets that done. So I got the Rebs winning that one. Losing that one. Rebs come back home at the Vault, get a win against the Vanderbilt Commodores. Then they stay at home. I apologize, against Texas A&M. That will be a loss. Then they go on the road at Georgia. Gets his former coworker Kirby Smart. I think that will be a loss. ULM, they'll get a win. And then I think the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving night at Mississippi State, I think that's a loss. I think the Rebs finish 6-6 overall, 2-6. Depth is the word that comes to mind. I just don't think Ole Miss has it, especially on defense. Pete Golden, it's not going to be his fault. It's just a personnel thing. I mean, again, they're still bringing people on the roster 2 weeks before their first game. Outside of Santarine Perkins, I mean, there isn't a lot of SEC-level players on defense. On offense, though, I think the Rebs are going to be fine. You got the Memphis tight end transfer, Caden Prescorn. He will be fine. I think if Michael Trigg could step up, he'll be a good player. I think true freshman from Jackson, Aiden Williams, he's been getting a lot of good vibes at a camp right there like him. Running back depth, though. I got called out on Twitter for saying Ole Miss doesn't have any running back depth. Take away Quinshon Judkins, who is Ole Miss's next running back. Ulysses Bentley, who's been hurt. The Oregon State transfer they just brought in 2 weeks ago. They don't have any depth there. So they better watch out and make sure you're not giving Quinshon Judkins 25 carries within the first month. You got to be careful. You always got to have some depth behind him. But the Rebs, I mean, they're going to be good enough to win 6 games. Again, I got them 6-6, 2-6, but I don't see a ton of improvement from last year on defense, and that's not Pete Golden's fault. It's a personnel thing. But again, I think the Rebs, color me shocked. I actually think Jackson Dart's going to have a good year. I just think the defense is not going to be very good. Pete Golden's going to have to create some turnovers on their own. They're going to be an aggressive defense. But again, I think 6-6, 2-6, finishing 7th in the SEC West. Heading to our number 6 team, the number 6 team in the SEC West. That is going to be the Mississippi State Bulldogs. And again, the graphic provided by our buddies FB Schedules. Mississippi State, I think they're going to finish 7-5, 6-6, 2-6 in conference. I think they're going to get the win against Southeastern at home. Arizona, that could be a little bit of a tougher game than expected, but I do think they get the win at home. LSU comes to town. I think LSU gets it done there. And then I think Mississippi State heads on the road at South Carolina, takes a loss. They're 2-2 in their first 4. Alabama comes to town. I think they take a loss there. Western Michigan comes to town. I think it's a loss. So I think sitting in their first 6, heading into their bye week, Mississippi State sitting there looking their wounds 6-6. Then you're going to be 3-3 after 6, heading into the bye week. At Arkansas, I think it's going to be a loss. They're sitting there at 3-4 at Auburn. I think it's going to make them 3-5. I do not think they go into Jordan-Hare and get that win. But I do think they bounce back here and get the win against Kentucky. I think this is their big win. They get a couple big wins down the stretch. It's their 4th win. They lose at Texas A&M, get their 5th win against Southern Miss, and then get bowl eligible. Get 6-6 by winning the Egg Bowl on Thanksgiving night against Ole Miss. So, I mean, I got Mississippi State here going 6-6, 2-6. I think there's going to be a tie for last place in the SEC West. But I think Mississippi State with the tiebreaker, with both teams being 2-6, Mississippi State getting the win. I got Mississippi State finishing 6 with losses to LSU, South Carolina, Alabama, Auburn, at Arkansas, and Texas A&M. I mean, Zach Arnett's first year, I like the offensive hire with Kevin Barbay. The offense, they're going to stretch the field vertically, horizontally. You got to be looking out for these tight ends. I think they had to go build a position room there because Mike Leach, God rest his soul, they didn't use tight ends in his offense. Probably didn't even have a position room in the facility. They had to go build one, but they brought in 2 good transfers in Georgia transfer Rylan Godey and then TCU transfer Jorquavius Spivey. Look out for those guys because I think they have enough wide receivers to win. I mean, like Kendrick Griffin, Justin Robinson, Xavier Thomas. I think guys like that. Watch out for true freshman Creed Whittemore. When I was at UCF, he was committed to us. Gainesville kid. You probably remember his brother, Trent Whittemore, who played a little bit at Florida. He's at UCF now. He's a kid to watch. Defensively, I don't think there should be a major adjustment. Remember, Zach Arnett was the defensive coordinator last year, so he's familiar with that. But they're going to have to replace some guys in the secondary, especially the safety position. But corner, they lose everything. Emmanuel Forbes, I don't know how he wasn't on the Jim Thorpe Award watch list last year, much less should have won it. Led the country in interceptions. But can guys like Alabama transfer Marcus Banks, Jacoby Albert, a Kentucky transfer, and Chris Keys step up in those safety positions? That's going to be key. But I do like their front 7. They got plenty of guys up front on the defensive line. I think Jaden Crumity is going to be fine. You got guys that have played a lot of football at the linebacker position. Nathaniel Watson and Jet Johnson have played a ton. But I think Mississippi State, I think it's a solid first year for Zach Arnett, going 6-6, get to a bowl game, beat your rival, get a big win over who I think is going to be a good Kentucky team to kind of end the year. But 6-6, 2-6 to tie for 6th in the West, but have the tiebreaker over the Ole Miss Rebels due to winning that head-to-head. But next, we're going to the 5th team in the SEC West. Let's go to it right now. And that will be the Auburn Tigers. Hugh Freeze's first season. Man, I think they're going to get that. The schedule is not that difficult. I mean, I think they're going to get the win against UMass. At Cal, I think could be a little tougher than people are thinking a little bit. Not because of Cal, because it's a cross-country road trip. They just named Peyton Thorne the starting quarterback today. Hugh Freeze did for Auburn. The Michigan State transfer. He was starting quarterback when they went to the Peach Bowl that year in 2021. I think he's got a real shot, but he wasn't there in the spring. So he's only been with Auburn through real practices a couple of weeks. So I think Auburn wins that game at Cal, maybe a little closer than people think. Auburn's going to get better as the year goes on. But let's go through the schedule again. Sanford, that's going to be a win. Auburn's going to start off 3-0. Then I think it's going to get rough here for the next 2 weeks. At A&M, I think it's going to be a loss, even though Auburn has only lost once ever in College Station so far. But again, I think it's going to be a loss this year. Georgia at home, I think it's going to be a loss. They're not ready for that yet. Bye week. Then I think they go to Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge. That's going to be a loss. Then I think they get a get-back right game that Hugh Freeze is going to take personally. He's going to want to win this game. Ole Miss is walking into a hornet's nest, I think, heading into Jordan-Hare Stadium. Auburn gets the win here, gets the win against Mississippi State the next week at home, goes and gets the win in Nashville. So I think they're getting 3. They're winning 3 in a row right here. Then I think a little bit they drop at Arkansas, get the win against New Mexico State, and then lose to Alabama 2 in the year. I think they finished the year 7-5, 3-5 in conference. Again, their losses at A&M, Georgia at home, at LSU, at Arkansas, and Alabama. I've said it all season. I think Auburn's going to roll in to the Iron Bowl with 7 wins. With 7 wins with a chance to get 8. Game's probably going to be a war, come down to the end. But I think Alabama's ultimately going to get it done. But again, Auburn be a solid first year for Hugh Freeze. The schedule sets up perfectly. Not a lot of tough non-conference games, as you can tell. Cal's your hardest non-conference game. That is a very winnable non-conference schedule. Then you draw Vandy out of the East. Couldn't ask for better. I know you get Georgia, but that's an every year opponent. You're used to it. Your East draw couldn't be any better. Hugh Freeze could not have asked for a better first-year schedule. Therefore, that's why I think they get to 7-5, 3-5 to finish 5th in the SEC. Let's move on. Let's move to the 4th team in the SEC West. Who will that be, you might ask? The Arkansas Razorbacks. Again, I'm not as high. And again, I think this whole 4 through 7 between Arkansas, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss, you could draw names out of the hat and it would not shock me. At some points when I was making this, I had Arkansas last in the West. Some points out of Mississippi State. Didn't ever really get to the point to put Auburn last, but just because I think Hugh Freeze has a little nugget in him, I think he's a good enough game day coach, prepares real hard like what he does. I think him himself's enough for another win or two. But again, I kind of had everybody outside of the top three in the West. We'll get to that in a minute. But Arkansas, they're going to finish 7-5, 3-5. Let's walk through it. I think they start off with wins against Western Carolina, Kent State, and BYU. And they get the LSU game earlier for them this year. At LSU, I think it's going to be a loss. Then they get, listen to this, they're on the road for 4 straight weeks. At LSU, it's going to be a loss. Texas A&M in Arlington, the Southwest Classic. Game's always a battle, but A&M always somehow pulls it out. I think, again, A&M pulls it out. Second loss at Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss gets it done. That's their third loss. At Alabama, it's a fourth loss. Then Mississippi State at home, they get right heading into the bye week. But, man, that's an hellacious from September 23rd to October 14th. The Arkansas Razorbacks will not be in Fayetteville or even the state of Arkansas at all. But I think they get back on track against Mississippi State at home. Then a bye week. Get rested. I think they head to the Swamp, get the win at Ben Hill Griffin. I think they get the win at home against Auburn, get the win at home against FIU. Hold on before you get too excited. I got Missouri winning that game again on that Friday after Thanksgiving. That's going to make the Razorbacks finish 7-5, 3-5 in conference. Remember, losses at LSU, A&M in Arlington, at Ole Miss, at Alabama, and Missouri. Again, not a bad season. Similar to last year, I'm just not a massive believer. Just not overly sold on the Razorbacks this season. I don't think they're going to be bad. Like I said, very similar to last season, but the defense will be improved just off a little bit of that defensive culture in that room with Travis Williams coming over from UCF. I've worked with him before. The guys are going to be playing with their hair on fire. It's not going to be lack of effort. Just I think personnel is a little lacking back there still in the secondary with guys like Hudson Clark. I know he's a cerebral kid. It's just really not who you want to be playing in the secondary in today's SEC. And I'm not overly sold of Dan Enos just turning KJ Jefferson into this great pro-style quarterback. Everybody throws in Jalen Hurts, but I think it's a little how Dan Enos made Jalen Hurts a better passer in 2018. I mean, Jalen Hurts didn't even start that year. And Jalen Hurts is a different beast alone by himself from a work ethic, personality standpoint. But, I mean, also, they need some help on the outside at receivers. I mean, Isaiah Satigna, he's going to have to step up. Isaac Tesla, he's going to have to step up. And the transfer, Andrew Armstrong. You're going to have some guy. Matt Landers is gone. Jaden Hazelwood's gone. Not only is it not putting too much on KJ Jefferson's plate, because I think he fit Kendall Brow's system better. It's also having people to help him on the edges. Now, I'm big on Varkey's Gum, the tight end transfer they got from North Texas. I think he could help them out a ton. But that just 4 straight weeks away from Fayetteville just really has me real nervous. Just tough schedule. Don't like the personnel on defense, especially on the back end. Someone has to step up on the outside for KJ Jefferson. Just keep going back and forth to that Ole Miss game. And like I said, give Ole Miss the edge there. But not as high on Arkansas as some people, not as high on KJ Jefferson and the Dan Enos marriage this year. But again, another solid season for the Razorbacks. 7-5, 3-5 overall in conference. Good for 4th in the SEC West. Moving on to our third team here in the SEC West. Let's get to them right here. It is, wish I had some kind of drum roll here to get this in, anticipate it a little better. Again, brought to you by our buddies at FB Schedules, the Texas A&M Aggies. The Texas A&M Aggies, call me crazy. I got them going 10-2, 6-2 for third place in the SEC West. You make 10-2 in their third place. Hear me out now. Then you're going to get a win against New Mexico. They're going to get a win against the Lobos. They're going to go down to Hard Rock Stadium, Miami Gardens, get another win against Miami like they did last year. Miami should be improved, but I don't think they're ready yet. I don't think people understand how talented Texas A&M is. At ULM, it should be a win. Auburn at home. Traditionally, Auburn's had their success at Kyle Field, lost their last appearance there, but I don't think Auburn's ready for that. I don't think they're ready for that. I think A&M gets that win. They always beat Arkansas. I'm still going to roll with that. I think they're going to start off 5-0 here. Then Alabama comes to town. Can A&M make it 2 straight years in a row, or 2 times in a row, back-to-back wins at Kyle Field against the Crimson Tide? I think they do. They're undefeated rolling into that next week to Neyland Stadium. Therefore, that's when they take their first loss. First loss right after the big emotional win against Alabama, against a good Tennessee team on the road. Place is going to be raucous. We're getting back to old Neyland now. We're going to play at Neyland Stadium is going to be a tough challenge. A&M is going to get their first loss. Then they're going to go into the bye week, licking their wounds, but still, They control their own destiny to win the SEC East or SEC West. They're going to get the win against their SEC East foe is what I meant. South Carolina at home. Go on the road against that Ole Miss team. I think it's going to be in the tank. Not a lot to play for. I think they win that game at Vaught Hemingway. Come back home, play Mississippi State. I think they win that game. Abilene Christian at home. Abilene Christian at home get the win. And then they go at LSU. And this is where I think they take the loss. And after I'm done with the West, I'll tell you how interesting of a point this is. But I think A&M finishes here 10-2, 6-2 in the conference. I'm not worried about the offense. I think the Bobby Petrino experiment is going to be good. You got a lot of great offensive minds in that room. Just full-time coaches alone. Jimbo Fisher, Bobby Petrino, Steve Adazio. And throw in that nobody's really talking about is former Georgia OC, has been with Georgia Tech here in the past few years, the Saints. He's an analyst, is Jim Chaney. He knows his way around an offensive staff room. Put up big-time numbers when he was the offensive coordinator at Tennessee in 2012 with Tyler Bray. He was the only thing keeping Tennessee above water from that in Derek Dooley's time because the defense was so bad. But again, a great offensive mind Jim Chaney is. As long as the injury bug, which started mounting a little bit between Donovan Johnson, the starting tight ends, out for the season with the ACL tear. I hear Bryce Foster, the starting center, who's one of their leaders, has some knick-knacky injuries. I think they should be fine on offense. People call me crazy. I think they got the best wide receiver room in the conference with Evan Stewart, Noah Thomas, Moose Muhammad. Guys like that, they got some real dudes in that room. Connor Weedman, I think he's more of a gamer. I think if you put the practice tape on, you wouldn't be overly impressed. But when the lights come on, I like what he does. 0 interceptions last year. 8 touchdowns and 0 interceptions in a tough situation for a true freshman. I like him to develop under Bobby Petrino. And the defense should only take a next step. I mean, there's too much talent on that defensive line. I mean, Walter Nolan, Shamar Turner, Shamar Stewart, McKinley Jackson. There's enough talent on that. I mean, they've recruited high-end defensive talent, 5 stars in the last 2 or 3 classes there. They should be better this year in the front. I mean, if DJ Durkin, second-year defensive coordinator, can just let his players play and not try to call the greatest defensive play, this perfect play to match his perfect scheme on offense, just let your players go play because mano-a-mano, A&M is going to be better than most teams they play this year. They've recruited that well. And I think you see the second-year jump that DJ Durkin took at Ole Miss. I mean, 2020 at Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin's first year, they were awful on defense. 2021, DJ Durkin's second year, they took that next step. I think you see that. And the key is stopping the run. The Aggies were awful. They were 119th last year in rushing defense. That should only improve, but I think a lot of that was scheme. Dumb it down. Let your guys go win the one-on-one battles because they're better. They're just better. They've recruited that. And like I've said a ton of times on the show, the talent level is just catching up to Texas A&M right now. Therefore, that's why I think the Aggies go 10-2 and 6-2 overall in conference play. But heading to second in our West here, you're kind of just process of elimination, getting down to who I could be talking about here. Here's the next one. Here's number 2. Who is it going to be? Who is it going to be? The LSU Fighting Tigers and Brian Kelly in his second year. The Tigers going 9-3, 6-2 in conference, tied with Texas A&M for second in the West. Leading off that schedule right here, I think they take a loss. I think Florida State's going to be pretty good. Here. I think they lose back-to-back years to Florida State. This game's at Camping World Stadium in Orlando. That Sunday night should be a hell of a ball game. But I think Florida State gets it done again. I think LSU bounces back with a win against Grambling State, gets the win at Mississippi State, gets the win at home against Arkansas, at Ole Miss, and this is the game I got them losing. Call me crazy. At Missouri. Excuse me. I think LSU is going to drop. Call me crazy. LSU is going to drop one of these 3 games. I'm saying it's Missouri, but they're going to drop a game at Mississippi State, at Ole Miss, or at Missouri. I just think they are this year. Just kind of a feel. I'll get into it in a minute. Not high on LSU's depth. I like their starting 22, but not on their depth. I would be shocked right now if they did not lose one of those 3 games to one of the Mississippi schools on the road, at Mississippi State or at Ole Miss or at Missouri. I mean, think about it. Missouri is their 6th game. It could be mount up some injuries. You never know, but I think that's where they drop. They're sitting there with 2 losses. Auburn never goes into Baton Rouge and wins that game. Don't think Hugh Freeze and them are ready for that. I think LSU gets back on track there. If they get a win against against Auburn, then who schedules Army for them? It's just bad scheduling there. It's unnecessary. You don't want that as one of your non-conference games. I don't know who did that. They need to answer to Scott Woodward on that one. But LSU gets the win there, heading into the bye week, and then it's going to come down to the SEC West for this game at Alabama. As you always know, that first Saturday in November has become it's a top 3 SEC rivalry of all time now, especially when you added Nick Saban going there. I don't have to get into it. At Alabama, I think that's their third loss. Bounce back, get a win against Florida at home, beat Georgia State at home, and then, like I mentioned, they get the win against A&M at Tiger Stadium. They get revenge from A&M. And let me sink this in here. Let me give you number 1 first before we go there. So LSU's going to finish 9-3, 6-2 in conference. Another solid year for Brian Kelly. Another great solid year. 9 wins again. It's solid. 9+ wins again. But that's where I got LSU finishing tied for second in the West with A&M. But they both go 6-2. But with LSU winning the head-to-head at home in the year, LSU takes that second place. And then finally, process of elimination, you know who it's going to be. Who's going to win the SEC West, who I have winning the SEC West in 2023. It is the Alabama Crimson Tide. Some people aren't believers. Some people are not believers. But Alabama, I think I got to go with 10-2, 7-1 in conference. And they're going to open up against Middle Tennessee State here with a win. Then Texas comes to town. I think Alabama loses this game. Call me crazy. I think there should be some early struggles on offense, then continue, and maybe they haven't figured out the quarterback play yet. I think Jalen Milroe is going to start against Middle. You're going to see series for him and Ty Simpson, maybe even Tyler Buckner there against Middle. I'm going to lean towards Milroe probably getting the start against Texas, but I think Texas is going to be good this year. I think Texas is going to be really good. Quinn Ewers, a lot of weapons on the outside for Texas here. We'll get into them in a minute. Then at USF, at South Florida, at Raymond James Stadium, the Buck Stadium, it's a random non-conference game for Alabama. They'll get that win. Ole Miss at home, that's another win. At Mississippi State, earlier in the season than normal, that's a win. At Texas A&M, that's their second loss. I don't think they go on the road and win that. So Alabama, before the month of October, has already got 2 losses. People are probably calling it it's over. The dynasty's dead. Well, Bama bounces back the next week against Arkansas. Gets revenge against Tennessee at home. Then the bye week. Then it's the SEC West showdown. Alabama, if they win this, they're back on track to win the SEC West. I think they get it done at home. This game was in Baton Rouge. I'd probably go LSU, I'll be honest. But I think this is where Alabama starts to come on here. And then a trap game, depending where Kentucky is injury-wise. It's late in the year, but usually Alabama doesn't play well in this spot. It's usually a game they play against Mississippi State traditionally, and they usually just get through it. They're banged up after playing LSU in a physical matchup. Alabama better watch out for this one. If Kentucky comes in scotch-free from an injury standpoint and they're rocking and rolling like I think they probably will be, Bama better watch out. But I think they're going to get – I'm not ready to say Alabama's going to lose that. I think they get the win there. Then the UT Chat mocks come to town. Bama's going to get the win there. And I think the Auburn game's going to be closer. I think Bama's going to get some of these close wins, but that will finish Alabama at 10-2, 7-1 in the SEC. And you know what? You know what game's going to define – oh, there's 2 games. 2 games that are going to define the SEC West this year. It's obviously, just like it normally is, Alabama, LSU. And then hear me out here. A&M is going to roll in to Tiger Stadium that Thanksgiving weekend, 6-1, where if they beat LSU, they win the SEC West. The last time they'll be in SEC West division, the Aggies have their chance to go into Tiger Stadium and get it done. They don't. That would give them their second loss. Alabama wins it with they go 7-1 in conference, 10-2 overall, losing to both Texas schools, losing to the Texas Longhorns at home and the Texas A&M Aggies on the road. Alabama at 10-2, 7-1 will have a chance to go to Atlanta to get to 11-2 and get a bid to the college football playoff against the SEC East winner, who we'll get to in just a minute. But again, I think the West is going to be crazy. I really do. I think it's going to come down to A&M's going to have their shot, that last chance, that last Saturday, probably Saturday night game, a chance to win. We're going to have a lot on the line. Bama's going to have to go win at Auburn, and they're going to have to hope LSU gets it done against Texas A&M, and I think it happens. I think the West is going to be crazy this year. I think it really is. Like I mentioned, I think 4 through 7, you could throw, like I said, Arkansas, Auburn, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss in a hat, pull out a hat, make, hey, they finished 7th. I'd believe you. Hey, they finished 6th. Yeah, I could see it. Hey, they finished 5th. Yeah, I could see that. 4th, absolutely. I think there's a top 3. And I think Texas A&M is going to be more in this SEC West race than people are thinking. Like I'm saying, they're going to go into that LSU game with a chance to win the SEC West. But Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers do the exact opposite of what Texas A&M did to them. Knocked them out of the playoff race the last game of the regular season. I think it's going to be crazy like that in the SEC West. Bama rolls into Atlanta, like I mentioned, with a real shot to get to the playoffs if they can defeat the SEC East. I just think it's going to come down to Alabama has the better top 40 than LSU. I think LSU is the better top 22, better starters. I think LSU is going to have the best offense in the SEC West. Then it could be A&M, and then it could be Bama. But I think Bama's marriage of their overall systems on offense and defense are going to be aligned for the first time since probably 2016, 17. People are going, what about 2020, man? They won the national championship. Maybe one of the best teams ever. Well, that team would have outscored anybody. Alabama's offense that year with that receiver room, Mac Jones, Najee Harris, they would have outscored anybody. I'm talking about with both sides of the ball were real married, and I think that's where Nick Saban feels real comfortable, and I think that's what you're going to see with this Alabama team this year. So I think Alabama gets it done, do their top 40. LSU's got the better top 22, but that secondary and that interior defensive line depth scares the heck out of me. It really does for LSU, because if Mason Smith or Mekhi Wing go down, who's next? Jordan Alexander or Jordan Jefferson, the West Virginia transfer? Maybe. I just think depth ultimately wins out through a 12-game schedule. Therefore, I'm going with the Alabama Crimson Tide rolling to Atlanta at 10-2, 7-1 in the conference with a chance to get into the college football playoff with a win. But yes, we are heading to the SEC East now. The SEC East. Let's get right to it. Coming in at number 7. The Vanderbilt Commodores. I got the Commodores going 4-8, 0-8. And before I start getting guitars thrown at me from Nashville, I don't think the 0-8 is really any. I know they won 2 games last year, 2 conference games last year, beating Kentucky and Florida. I don't think, obviously it's a regress going from 2 to 0, but I don't really think that's a bad thing. They just got to continue to keep recruiting. But let's get to it real fast. Hawaii, I think it's a win. It's a return trip for Hawaii, week 0. It's a week from this upcoming Saturday. The construction site that is Vanderbilt Stadium right now. But they get the win against Alabama A&M 2-0 at Wake. That's 3-0. Make a trip to Vegas 4-0 to UNLV. They get that game against the Running Rebels. I think they drop the game against Kentucky. Drop the game to Missouri. I think Florida gets revenge at Florida. I think it's a loss. Georgia at home. That's an obvious loss. Bye week. And then at Ole Miss, I think that's a loss. Auburn at home. That's a loss. At South Carolina, I think that's a loss. Another bye week sandwiched in because they played week 0. Then at Tennessee to wrap it up. It's 0-8. And that sounds like David. You sound lazy. You're just throwing Vanderbilt 0-8 just because they won 2 conference games last year. Well, who are they better than? I believe in Clark Lee and the job he's doing, but again, it's kind of like Ole Miss's defense. It's a personnel thing. It just comes down to personnel in the secondary. What kills me is guys like DeRicky Wright, who we recruited out of high school when I was in the business. He's a linebacker at heart. He's playing safety. They just don't have a lot of athletes who can cover. Heck, Vanderbilt's going to be better on offense. I like A.J. Swan. I like Will Shepherd at the receiver position. They've been torching their own defense in both scrimmages. The defense, Clark Lee said, improved a little bit in the second one, but apparently the first one was terrible. Guys are streaking 30, 40 yards wide open. And let's be honest, Vanderbilt's going to see better offenses in their own. Just is what it is. I think we're going to see a lot of kind of what that Ole Miss game was last year. Jonathan Mingo almost set a career record day and almost got drafted off that game alone. I think the secondary is going to be that bad. It's something they're going to have to go improve this offseason. But again, I think the offense can be able to hang with some teams. I think they'll be able to put up points, but I don't think they're going to put up enough. Schedule's tough in conference. Who are they better than in the East? I think Missouri, they can get solid quarterback play. We'll get to them in a minute. Vanderbilt's not better than them. Kentucky, no way, not this year. Florida, they beat them last year. You can make a case. That Florida this year, I think Florida, Billy Napier knows he can't lose to Vanderbilt back-to-back years. No one's ever made it through losing to Vanderbilt back-to-back years. He knows even if Florida comes in with 2 or 3 wins into that game, they're not having the season they want. They know they have to win that, so they're going to take it serious. I just don't know who Auburn's better than. Vanderbilt is better than. The only game I think conference they could really get here is what's Ole Miss's mentality when Vanderbilt comes to town to Oxford. Vanderbilt could maybe need that win more than Ole Miss. Ole Miss sitting there, 1-3 in conference, 1-4 in conference, not a lot to play for, like I keep saying. So I picked them last in the West. That's a game they could potentially get, but I just don't see it. I think they take care of business, start off 4-8 or 4-0, end up 4-8 and 0-8 in conference. But again, it would not shock me if they got a conference win. But moving to the 6th place team in the SEC's Eastern Division. Not used to seeing this team here, huh? The Florida Gators. Call me crazy. I think they're going to go 4-8, 2-6 in conference. I think they're going to drop the game at Utah, which I feel a little bit better for Florida now, hearing Utah may be playing their 3rd-string quarterback. Cam Rising's out. The backup quarterback got hit in the scrimmage, has a punctured liver, broke his ribs, has a punctured liver, so he's definitely out. against Florida. If Cam Rising can't go, they're playing a third-string quarterback, and Florida is plenty talented enough to go to Salt Lake City, even with some young cats that they have, because they're better players for Florida, are all young, and get that win. But I'm still going to call it a loss. I think Cam Rising is going to play. I think it's kind of a rumor he's not, so I expect him to play. So I think that's a loss. McNeese State, they're going to get a win there. Tennessee at home, that's a loss. Charlotte at home win. At Kentucky, that's a loss. Kentucky's better than Florida this year. Vanderbilt at home, that's a win. At South Carolina, that's a loss. Chris mentioned that's going to be a must-win for South Carolina at home. Got embarrassed in the Swamp last year. I think it's going to be a game Shane Beamer wants. I think South Carolina gets it done, so it's a loss for the Gators. Bye week before the world's largest cocktail party. We still call it that here at Mach 10 Sports. That's going to be a loss to Georgia. Arkansas at home, I think that's going to be a loss. At LSU, that's going to be a loss. At Missouri, it's November 18th. I've lived in Kansas. I've lived in that area before. November 18th, it's going to be cold. I've also worked down in the state of Florida before. The Florida boys don't like to go play in the cold. It's going to be cold in Columbia, Missouri, November 18th. They're not going to be really on a run. They're going to be coming off 4 straight losses. Those guys aren't going to be real fired up there. At Missouri, it's a loss. Then Florida State, I think they're going to be a good ball club this year. I think they have a real chance to get to the college football playoffs this year. That's going to be a loss. 4-8. I mean, their 2 non-conference games are tough. At Utah and Florida State. I mean, it could be Utah could win the Pac. Those are 2 Power 5 potential conference champions. Utah out of the Pac-12. I mean, I don't think they win the Pac-12, but a lot of people do. And then Florida State in the ACC. I think they win the ACC. That's a tough non-conference schedule. I'm telling you, try to find me 8 wins. I think 6. If they win 8 games, Billy Napier should be the national coach of the year. Again, Billy Napier is going to get it done if they give him time. They're recruiting well. Just in today's time, do these kids bail on you and they have the one-time transfer when it gets real bad? That's the thing. The roster retention. Is all that recruiting work going to be out the door if you go 4-8? And then throw in the 24 season. You add in Oklahoma and Texas. It's only going to get tougher. It's only going to get tougher. So, unfortunately, I got the Gators sitting there at 6. I mean, Graham Mertz is going to be the starter there. Offensively, it's going to come down to the offensive line improving significantly. And then one of the young guys on the outside at receiver, Eugene Wilson or Andy Jean, having to step up. And again, I'm not really overly worried about Mertz. I think he's going to be able to get it out. He's a smart kid. He processes. I think he's going to be able to make throws. But will he have any more weapons outside of Ricky Pearsall? And can anyone on the step up on the offensive line step up and protect? Defensively, I think they're going to be real aggressive with new offensive coordinator Austin Armstrong, who was at Southern Miss last year. But around half the 2 deep, I looked it up today, 11 of the 2 deep out of their 22 on defense are second-year players or younger. Again, all their good players are young guys except probably Jason Marshall outside there. But the talent there is just, like I said, it's young across the board. The schedule's brutal. If they got to 6 wins, that would be incredible for Billy Napier. That sounds crazy. But I think Florida's staring at a losing season 3 years in a row. For the 3rd year in a row, I think they're going to have a losing season. Dan Mullins last year, they finished 6-7 after losing their bowl game to UCF. Last year, they finished with a losing record after losing their bowl game to Oregon State at 6-7. And this year, I think they're going to 4-8. Crazy to say even 5 years ago, Florida could go 3 straight years with a losing record. But they got the Gators due to schedule and just youth. It's 6th in the SEC East. Going to the 5th team here. Man, I'd give anything for a little drum roll here. The Missouri Tigers. The Missouri Tigers coming in at 5th. I like Missouri this year. It's going to come down to quarterback play. Just quarterback play. I think they get a win against South Dakota, Middle Tennessee State. I think that's a win. I think they get revenge here. I think K-State comes to town. They get revenge. I think it's a win for Missouri. Memphis at the Dome in St. Louis. I think that is a win for the Missouri Tigers. At Vandy, I think it's a win as well. LSU, that's going to be a win. At Kentucky, I think they dropped that. I think South Carolina finally gets that monkey. Shane Beamer gets that monkey off his back. Finally beats Eli Drinkowitz in the battle for Columbia, who gets the right to take home their city as their heck. The last 2 years, Missouri's just kind of pulled South Carolina's pants down on them. But I think South Carolina has this game circled just like the one they do at against Florida. I think South Carolina gets it done. Then a bye week at Georgia. I think that's a loss. Tennessee at home, I think that's a loss. I think they get a win, like I mentioned earlier on Florida's schedule. They get a win against Florida. And I think they go get the win at Arkansas. I think they're going to finish 8-4, 4-4 in conference. That's crazy to say at 8-4, they'd be 5th in the East. But again, I think 8-4, 4-4. I think quarterback play is going to be a little better. I mean, whether that's whether that's our guy Brady Cook, Sam Horn, Jake Garcia transfer from Miami, there's weapons on the outside, man. Theo Weiss, Luther Burden, Mookie Cooper. I like the running backs. The offensive line has a lot of winnable depth there. It's going to come down to quarterback play. The defense has the most returning starters in the league. They should be good. I think Missouri's easy. Their equation is so easy, probably easier than anybody else in the SEC. It's going to come down to quarterback play. They get solid quarterback play, they're going to get to 8 wins, and I think they'll end up getting to 8 wins. But again, their big win will be against LSU, and I think to end the year against Arkansas. I like Missouri this year, but there'll be a lot of pressure though in Eli Drinkwitz if the quarterback play is not good. If they can't get a solid starter between those three, between Brady Cook, Sam Horn, and Jake Garcia. But again, 8-4 with losses to Kentucky, South Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee. Another solid year for Missouri. You factor in that new legislation they passed in the state of Missouri. Kids in that state can start getting NIL deals out of high school now. So that's really going to help them. But Missouri's always kind of kept, even before Eli Drinkwitz, they're big-time kids in state. Eli Drinkwitz has only done that, only continue to do this. And this is his most talented team. They've done a great job recruiting at Missouri in his first 3 classes there. And I think it starts to pay off this year. Again, Missouri finishing 5th in the East, 8-4, 4-4. Now, let's go get to 4th in the East. Who do you think that is going to be? Who is going to be the 4th place team in the SEC East this year? Maybe a little familiar with them. We had a guest earlier. South Carolina Gamecocks, baby. I think they're going to finish in 7-5, 4-4 here. I think they dropped the first one against North Carolina. I think North Carolina's be better than people think. I think North Carolina gets that win against South Carolina. South Carolina's going to start off 0-1. Get a win against Furman. At Georgia is going to be tough. That's going to be a loss. Mississippi State at home. I think that's going to be a win. And then I think at Tennessee's going to be, this is one of my guaranteed wins right here. I am very confident in this one. At Tennessee, I think it's going to be a loss. I'm very confident in that one. Bye week, Florida at home. You heard Chris talk about it. These next 2, Florida at home and at Missouri, those are 2 I think South Carolina's going to have circled because they've been getting embarrassed by them recently. I think Florida's a win, and I think at Missouri's a win. And I think at Texas A&M is going to be a loss. It's going to be a tough game for them. They rarely win that. Again, it just seems like A&M has Arkansas and South Carolina's numbers, and they play them every year. Jacksonville State, the fellow Gamecocks rode to town. I think South Carolina proves to be the better Gamecocks there. Kentucky, it's going to be a loss. I think Kentucky comes to town and gets the win there. And then finally, I think Beamer goes back-to-back, baby. I think they get the win against Clemson at home at Williams-Brice Stadium. Gamecocks finish 7-5 with losses to North Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas A&M, and Kentucky. But again, he gets 3 big wins. So Shane Beamer gets 3 big wins in his 3rd year. Florida gets the Missouri monkey off their back, and he gets a 2nd straight win against Clemson. I think this will be something South Carolina fans will be fired up about. You heard Chris. He had the ceiling at 8. Not far from that, but again, the key for the Gamecocks will be the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. I have question marks on both sides. The offensive line, we talked about running backs. They got a converted quarterback, wide receiver, going to be running back 1 for them heading into week 1 to Carryon Joyner, great kid. Used to recruit him when I was at Auburn. But it's not ideal. I think Dow Loggins, the new OC coming over from Arkansas, he was the tight ends coach at Arkansas. I think him and Spencer Rattler's marriage is going to be awesome. I think, again, Chris mentioned it. Spencer Rattler is at his best when he's improvising. He's a gunslinger, dude. His highs are going to be high, and his lows are going to be low. It's the best way to explain him. A little Brett Favre-ish. I just don't trust the offensive line to ultimately get that 8 wins. And I may be a little too high on him. Anywhere from 6-6, 7-5 would not shock me. But again, I don't overly trust the offensive line or the running backs in the backfield, and the run game is going to have to improve. Can the defense stop the run? I mean, outside of Tonka Hemingway, a defensive tackle for South Carolina, I don't really trust a lot. They lost both inside backers with Sherrod Green and Brad Johnson. They're both gone. They got to replace that. Pup Howard, true freshman they signed, the big-time kid. He's banged up a little bit right now. I actually like the young secondary. I mean, you got guys like Nick Imonawari. I think he's going to be a solid player. And then DQ Smith, the other safety. They're both young. They'll both be back. Talking to guys over there at South Carolina, they like their team in 24 right now over than 23. Again, a lot can happen between then. But it's going to come down to staying healthy and getting established some kind of run game, and can the offensive line for South Carolina protect Spencer Rattler, and they have to be better against the run. I think they will be. I think they're going to be 7-5. Nothing to really write home about. But again, I think they're going to get 3 solid wins against Florida at home, at Missouri, like I keep mentioning, getting that Eli Drinkwitz Missouri monkey off their back. I think they get it done this year. And then again, a big win against Clemson at the end of the year. So I think Shane Beamer will be heading into some momentum, heading into 24 when the conference extends again with Oklahoma and Texas. It's only going to get harder. It's only going to get harder for Shane Beamer. But again, I think he puts another solid campaign together here in 23 to get to 7-5 and finish fourth here in the SEC East. Who's going to be third? Who is going to be third? I know everybody, we're getting down to the nitty gritty here. Who is going to be third in the SECs? Let's pull up the graphic from our friends FB Schedules. Call me crazy. Oh, baby. Oh, baby. Vol Nation, Vol Twitter is going to be on my tail. They already didn't like the way I evaluated their offensive line. Called me an idiot. But anyways, we got them sitting there at third. I think Tennessee's going to finish 9-3, 5-3 in conference. Let's get to it, though. I think first game against Virginia, it's going to be a lot of orange in that stadium at Nissan Stadium. I think they get that win. Tennessee, I think the line right now, looked at it the other day, is -28. I think Tennessee gets after it. I think Tennessee's a team you're talking about after week one. I think they're going to look good. Austin Peay, the Govs are going to make the bus trip up. I think Tennessee gets that win, though, 2-0. At Florida, I think to be a little tougher than a lot of people were projecting back in January, April, like I mentioned last episode, but the Vols will get this done. UTSA, who scheduled this one again? Jeff Traylor and the boys rolling in. But I think Tennessee's going to be too much for them. South Carolina, revenge factor. Josh Heupel and the Vol Nation are going to be jacked to get revenge against a South Carolina team that embarrassed them last year, put up 60 points, and then knocked them out of the college football playoff. This is going to be a guaranteed win. Bye week, Tennessee gets to watch Texas A&M play Alabama the week before while they're sitting at home. Then A&M, I think, like I mentioned, A&M's going to win that game against Alabama, come in high, emotional. Tennessee's, it's going to be a big win for Tennessee. At Neyland Stadium, I don't see the Aggies winning this game in Neyland after beating Alabama. But then Tennessee's going to roll in. They'll probably be top 5, easily top 6, heading into Tuscaloosa for another showdown. Can Tennessee beat Alabama back-to-back years for the first time since, what is it, 2003, 2004? Yeah, 2003, 2004 will be the last time Tennessee is beating Alabama back-to-back years. But it doesn't get done this year. Alabama gets their revenge factor. They'll have that game circled. Tennessee drops their first game of the season at Alabama. And then hold up. Tennessee's going to be, I think they're going to be a little moseying in. Oh, we lost Alabama the first time. SEC East is still in line. And Tennessee's used to beating Kentucky. But you know what? They got to go to the Krog this year, Kroger Field in Lexington, the very next week. I don't think they're going to bounce back from that Alabama game that quick. Kentucky's going to be a good team this year. I think Kentucky gets that win. That's going to be back-to-back losses for the Vols. Knock them out of the SEC East race right then. But they're going to bounce back, get a win against UConn, get a win at Missouri, lose to Georgia at home, and get a win against Vanderbilt. They're going to finish 9-3, 5-3 in conference. Again, I'm going to probably be called an idiot. Tennessee fans are not going to like this. They had one good year last year. 9-3 is another good year. I know you don't really like to hear that, but it's another good year. I mean, Tennessee's a comfortable group this year. I mean, I mentioned I was at the personnel symposium last year, talked to a couple guys on their staff. They're real comfortable, and they keep saying it, and it sounds cliche. It's going to come down to Joe Milton. It's going to come down to Joe Milton. And what I'm about to say is not some crazy statement either, but he's not going to be Hendon Hooker. But that doesn't mean Tennessee's going to be bad. Again, 9-3 is a solid season. The defense, a veteran group, they got 32 starters on the overall team, but on the defense, they got a lot of veterans back there in the secondary. The kind of bad rap I had last year with Tennessee that would get me bothered. A lot of people just bash the defense, but they only gave up, I'm looking at it right now, 22 points per game last year. With their offense, if you ask Josh Heupel, man, if your defense coach told you for the season only gives up 22 points a game, what are you thinking? He's probably thinking 11-2 with an Orange Bowl victory, which happened. So, again, the defense gets a bad rap, but they're opportunistic. They locked down when they had to lock down. The key for Tennessee is going to be how are they going to react to being the hunted each week. They're not going to surprise people anymore. Everyone is going to be looking to beat Tennessee. I think that accounts for a loss for a team. No one on that roster has ever had to have that mindset of, hey, we're the hunted, but let's embrace it. Tennessee last year was the hunter. Had a great season, 11-2 Orange Bowl champs. But it's different when you're the hunter, when you're the hunted. It's totally different when you're the hunted. Like I said, this is a veteran team, though, so they're not going to get too far off the beaten path. In a 9-3, again, Ball Nation, this is not a bad season. It's not a bad season. It should set you up for some success in 24. But at 9-3, 6-2 in conference, it's another solid season. Depending on what happens, that could maybe get you in the CFP Bowl. but at least you're in Florida for a bowl game. Again, another solid season for Tennessee, finishing third in the East, 9-3, 5-3, with losses at Alabama, at Kentucky, and Georgia at home. Heading into the second team from the SEC East. Call me crazy here. Call me crazy here. I may get some flack for this. Pull it up, graphics guy. Come on, baby. Pull it up for us. The Kentucky Wildcats. The Kentucky Wildcats. It's going to delay the excitement for the Kentucky basketball season a little bit. I'm sorry, Cal. I'm sorry, John Calipari. I am sorry. The Cats, I think they're going to get it done. 9-3, 5-3. Tennessee and Kentucky are going to tie for second at 5-3 in the SEC. But Kentucky's got that tiebreaker. We'll see it in a minute. They're going to start off with a win against Ball State, win against Eastern Kentucky, win against the Zips from Akron, win at Vanderbilt. 4-0. I mean, you got Liam Cohen back. I think Devin Leary is going to be the guy that takes the conference by storm this year. 4-0, man. They can iron out some of those wrinkles in their first 4 weeks. I mean, Ball State, Eastern Kentucky, Akron, and at Vandy. Before Florida comes into town, it's going to be a big game. I think they get it done, though. 5-0, heading in for a CBS battle, most likely at Georgia. That's going to be a loss. Bounce back the next week, get the win against Missouri. Then they get a bye week. They get to watch Tennessee go get emotionally drained in Bryant-Denny Stadium against Alabama while Kentucky's sitting at home in the training room, getting rested, getting their treatment. They await Tennessee to come back the next week wounded. Kentucky gets it done at Kroger Field. Kentucky doesn't beat Tennessee a lot, but this year they are. And then Kentucky's going to come back to earth a little bit here. An emotional high off beating a team you're not used to beating at Tennessee. They're going to go on the road against their common Western Division foe they play every year, Mississippi State, in Starkville. And this is going to be Zach Arnett's big win outside of him beating Ole Miss this year. That's going to be his big win this year, beating a 9-3 Kentucky team. That's Kentucky's second loss right there. And then Alabama, it's a sneaky game, though. Depending where Kentucky is from an injury standpoint, Alabama plays LSU the week before. Alabama usually struggles in this spot, that second weekend in November, just because they're worn out, emotionally tired, physically exhausted playing at LSU. But I don't think the Cats get it done. This will be their third loss. Then they'll go to Columbia. I think they'll get it done against South Carolina. Then they'll head across state and go play their rival, the Louisville Cardinals, and they'll get that win. Kentucky's going to finish 9-3, 5-3 conference. Good for tied for second in the SEC East with Tennessee, but they got the head-to-head with Tennessee, so they're second. Man, that's going to be a big game or big season for Kentucky. I'm high on the Cats. Liam Cohen's back. Remember, he was the 2021 offensive coordinator, went with the Rams last year. He's back. I think the scheme is going to change things. Like I mentioned, Devin Leary, the NC State transfer, I think he's going to be solid coming off the injury. The whole key for Kentucky, because you got to think, they have the best wide receiver group they ever had with Berrien Brown, Tavion Robinson, Dane Key. Berrien Brown's got some soft tissue. He's got a soft tissue injury right now, something like plantar fasciitis, I think, but he'll be fine. The best wide receiver room Kentucky's ever had. The key will be, can the big blue wall get back to what they're used to doing? Can they get it done? I think a scheme change with Liam Cohen. No offense to Rich Scangarello, the former OC, but I think Liam Cohen adjusts the scheme to fit the need of what Kentucky's offensive line wants. And then you got to add additions. Marquise Cox in the transfer portal from Northern Illinois. Cortland Ford, transfer from USC. I think they're going to step in, be contributors. The big blue wall is going to get the mojo back because they were awful last year. And still went to a bowl game. They're going to be improved. It's going to allow this team to get to a 9-win team. Chris mentioned it. Ray Davis, the Vanderbilt transfer. I think he'll be serviceable enough to replace Chris Rodriguez. Not as good, but serviceable enough. Just needs some depth after losing Cavassier Smoke as well. But I may be wrong. But the offensive line is going to get back to its ways. And I think Kentucky's defense is always, J.J. Weaver and the boys, that it's always good enough. You mentioned it. Oxendine, too. Chris mentioned it. Kentucky has some guys in that front seven. And they're always, Kentucky's defense with Mark Stoops and Brad White always play good enough defense to go win 8 games. I think it's going to be the same this year. The offensive line is going to be the difference. Devin Leary is going to be the difference. Liam Cohen's going to be the difference. The Cats are talking athletics, talking Kentucky football in November as Kentucky basketball is playing in the Champions Classic against North Carolina, I believe. But call it what it is, man. Kentucky is going to be really good this year. I'm hearing stuff from there. I think sometimes people are like, well, we always kind of say it. No, it's a for real team this year. 9-3, 5-3, second in the East. You heard it here first. And then big shocker. Who's going to win the East? Man, I can't imagine who's going to win the SEC East. I'll give you one guess. I mean, process of elimination, then obviously we probably didn't even need this. You would have guessed it. The 2-time defending national champions, the Georgia Bulldogs, baby. You're going to go 12-0, 8-0 in conference. I don't see anyone beating them in the regular season. I think the only shot they would have is at Tennessee, that November 18th matchup. But again, Georgia gets UT Martin. It's going to be a win. Ball State at home. That's going to be a win. South Carolina at Sanford Stadium. That's going to be a win. Just a little tidbit here. Kirby Smart cannot stand Shane Beamer, so he has that game circled. Georgia will put up as many points. They'll put up some extra points if they can get it done. For whatever reason, they don't like each other. They work together. I don't know. I've just heard that. UAB, that's going to be a win. At Auburn, first true road game, could be a little hairy depending on what Auburn is doing. Auburn probably rolls in undefeated, but Auburn didn't have the depth for that. Again, you get annoyed probably hearing me say this. It is about your top 40, not your first 22. Georgia's going to win that game. Kentucky at home, I think this is going to be an undefeated SEC on CBS showdown. Georgia's going to get it done at home. At Vanderbilt, that's going to be a win. Bye week before they head to Jacksonville for the world's largest cocktail party again. That's what we call it here at Mach 10 Sports. It's going to be a win against Florida. Missouri at home, that's going to be a win. Ole Miss, I think it's going to be a win. At Tennessee, tricky. Could be a tough one, but I think it's going to be a win. Then at Georgia Tech and Brent Key's first season, that's going to be a win. I mean, maybe you would feel a little differently. I know some people are like, well, even their national championship team against Missouri last year was down 10 with 8 minutes left at Missouri. Again, but I don't see any road games like that. I mean, you got South Carolina, Missouri, and Kentucky all at home. I mean, the road games at Auburn and at Tennessee. I mean, at Auburn and at Tennessee would be your only – I mean, Tennessee, it's not going to be Auburn. At Tennessee. But again, they're going to go 12-0, 8-0 in conference. Deepest roster, top 40 in college football. You just back-to-back. So many recruiting classes back-to-back. And Georgia does a good job of getting their young guys reps. So it's not just a, hey, sink or swim. They have an idea when they get out there, especially the guys in the secondary, what they're doing. Do they have question marks? Absolutely. Just like anyone else. Quarterbacks. I don't think the quarterbacks are as far as long as they want. Looks like it's going to be Carson Beck, but I think they have a deep room there. But the only question on offense, besides quarterback, but I'm not as worried as some, is really, do they have a dude in that running back room? I think it's to be more by committee approach with guys like Kendall Milton, DeJuan Edwards, and Branson Robinson this year. I don't really think they have a dude like Zamir White. I don't think they're going to have a dude, obviously, like Sonny Michel, or Nick Chubb. I just don't think they're going to have any guys like that this year. I don't think they have I don't think they have a dude in that room this year. I don't think they have a Kenny McIntosh. But I do think they have a winnable enough unit with Kendall Milton, DeJuan Edwards, and Branson Robinson to get the job done with a really good offensive line unit that Stacey Searles has going there. So, again, no surprise. Defensively, just probably be a little drop-off, but I do like the offensive. I do like the defensive line there. I like Nazir Stackhouse. I like guys across the board there. Watch out for Mykel Williams. I think that kid's ready to step it up. The Columbus, Georgia native, he's going to step it up. But, again, I think finding that consistent edge rusher could be an issue for him. May not hit them in the first 12, but once you get to the SEC championship game, semifinals, the national championship, you got to get to the quarterback without blitzing, without bringing an extra defender from the second or third level. That may not rear its ugly head till the end, but someone out of Jalen Walker, Chaz Chambliss, and Marvin Jones is going to have to step up for my guy, the outside linebacker coach, Chidera Uzo-Deribe, works in Kansas. Great guy, does a great job at Georgia, young upcoming cat. He should be able to figure it out, but that's my only concern for Georgia's defense is establishing an edge rusher out of between one of those three guys. Not, like I said, through the first 12, not through the first 12 games, but when they get to Atlanta for the SEC championship game, semifinals, whoever that may be against, and in the national championship game. Because if you don't bring your A-plus game in the semis or in the SEC championship and obviously the national championship, you can get beat if you bring your B-minus game and someone else like last year. It almost happened against Ohio State. You just never know. But I do think they will get that figured out. Just the schedule, just way too soft. Again, not their fault. The SEC made them they were supposed to play Oklahoma at a conference this year, and the SEC made them change it for whatever reason. I forget why. They didn't make Alabama and Texas change, but for whatever reason, I think they plugged in UAB instead of Oklahoma. But you see it. I mean, they're at a conferences, UT Martin, Ball State, UAB, and Georgia Tech. I mean, I'd be shocked if Georgia lost a game in their first 12, much less two. So I feel very confident Georgia will win the SEC East. And therefore, our SEC championship game going to come down to between the SEC Western Division, Alabama, and the SEC Eastern Division winner, Georgia. I got Georgia winning it. Georgia's going to head to the college football playoff at 13-0. Alabama's going to drop to 10-3, not make the playoffs. But speaking of playoffs, final predictions of the 2023 season. The number 1 seed, The Georgia Bulldogs, we just mentioned it. They're going to get in. I don't have to go through them again. They're going to be fine offensively. Just finding a dude come along in that running back room. Or is he going to be more by committee? I trust the offensive line to get it done. And can, come SEC championship time, playoff time, can Georgia find some edge rushers between Chambliss, Walker, and Jones to be able to get to the quarterback without bringing someone from the second or third level? That'll be key. But Georgia will roll into the playoffs, is the 1 seed. The second seed, the Florida State Seminoles. I mean, loaded roster. Been doing well in recruiting, plug and play some guys to the transfer portal. I love what Jordan Travis is doing. They have weapons on the outside with Johnny Wilson, receiver. Keon Coleman transferred in from Michigan State. Just a freaky athlete. It's probably the best roster Florida State's had since 2014. By that last year, they made the playoff with Jimbo, Jameis Winston's last year, the year they lost to Oregon in the playoffs. And then the schedule, the ACC is going to be weak. It's going to be down this year. Would be shocked if Florida State beats they got 2 games. Unless they choke and lose a game they're not supposed to, but I think they're just so much more talented than anyone else in the ACC. They win one of the 2 games against LSU and Clemson, and then obviously win the ACC championship game. They're going to be in the playoffs. I feel as good as I can about that. I don't know if Mike Norvell's been in this position as kind of, like I said, with Josh Heupel in Tennessee's program, the hunter. People are going to be looking out for them this year. But if they can just split that LSU Clemson game, they should get it. They should be in the playoffs. They should be in the playoffs, and I think they will get that done. Like I mentioned, I think Florida State beats LSU. I think Florida State probably rolls into the playoffs either 13-0, 12-1 in. They'll be the 2 seed. Then the number 3 seed. Call me crazy. I think they're officially back. I think they're back. As Sam Ellinger once said, we're back. The Texas Longhorns come in as the 3 seed. Things feel different this year. I like watching interviews with Sark. I feel really good. I like Quinn Ewers. I like their weapons on the outside. A.D. Mitchell, transferred from Georgia. Xavier Worthy, an explosive athlete. I like the Sanders kid, the Jatavian Sanders kid at tight end. I mean, I think they obviously lose with John Robinson. But I think they got some guys in the backfield that could help. Look out for true freshman C.J. Baxter from Orlando. Freak, 5-star running back. He should help. I think Texas is going to be solid on the defensive line this year. I like both sides of the line of scrimmage for them this year. I really do. I think Quinn Ewers takes that next step. Look for under-the-radar Heisman candidate there. I think Texas gets it done. I think they're going to be the 3 seed. I think this is the first year you can honestly say it's bad. I mean, Josh Pate, I think, made a good analogy the other day. He was talking about it's Dante's Peak. Pierce Brosnan's telling everybody in that town, hey, I mean, this volcano, I think it's got a real shot to explode. It's never exploded since I've lived here. That's what a lot of people in Gen Z are saying. They've never known Texas being that good. None of them really remember Texas making it to the national championship game against Alabama in 2009. And they sure as hell don't remember Texas winning the national championship with Vince Young in 2005. Some of those kids were born around that time. But just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean it won't. Texas comes in as the 3 seed in the college football playoff this year. And finally, the last spot, the Michigan Wolverines, baby. Top 5 production back. This is Jim Harbaugh's best team he's ever had. Can they get over the hump this year? Can they win the Big Ten for the 3rd straight year? And can they win a college football semifinal game? I think the Big Ten East is going to be loaded between Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State. But I think their season is going to come down to winning 2 out of 3 to end the year against at Penn State, at Maryland, and Ohio State. If they can win 2 out of those 3, they get Ohio State at home. They can win 2 out of those 3, get to Indianapolis to go face the West winner. I think they'll get in as the 4 seed. But like I said, this should be Jim Harbaugh's best team. I don't think they get through the season unscathed. That's why I got them as the 4 seed. But I do think they win the Big Ten again. I mean, a sleeper team here for me. I think one of those other 2 teams at the Big East between Penn State and Ohio State, but I think they're going to be a little bit like the SEC West and beat up on each other in those top 3 spots. But those are my college football playoffs heading in. The Georgia Bulldogs is the 1 seed. The Florida State Seminoles is my 2 seed. The Texas Longhorns is my 3 seed. And the Michigan Wolverines is my 4 seed. The national championship game, I'm going to have Georgia versus Texas. I think Georgia's going to beat Michigan again. I think Texas is going to beat Florida State. I think Georgia is going to three-peat. I think they're going to make history. They should. At that point, I think they will have a good enough running game. The offensive line will be solid. They recruit enough. Someone will step up in the backfield or will be by committee. I think that by that point, either they'll have a guy to rush the passer without bringing guys from the 2nd or 3rd level, or from scheme standpoint, they'll make it work. Again, call me crazy. Crazier things. Would I be shocked if Georgia didn't win the national championship? Absolutely not. Absolutely. Would I be shocked if they were not in the playoffs? Yes. But to win the national championship, again, they almost didn't win it last year against Ohio State. I was there in person, witnessed it. Ohio State probably outplayed them, but Georgia survived and made plays when they had to. All it takes in my playoffs is Michigan bringing their A game, Georgia bringing their B minus game, Carson Beck not playing that well, and Michigan's going to the national championship game. That's all it takes, or whoever they're playing in that first semifinal game. Or even it goes 10 days later when they're playing the national championship in Houston and they just don't get it done because they didn't play their best that day. Doesn't mean they don't have the best top 40. Georgia has the best top 40 in the country. Don't ever doubt that. But again, doesn't mean they'll win it all. But me here, Mock 10 Sports, our 2023 predictions, I do think Georgia knocks off the Texas Longhorns in the 2024 national championship. This will be the last 14 playoff before we head to 12 next year. So we'll be going a little bit more in deep with our college football playoff projector, obviously, last year. But again, this was the prediction episode. Call me crazy, man. You tell them high on Kentucky, finishing second in the East. Got Georgia winning the East. Alabama winning the East in a crazy or winning the West in a crazy manner. A&M is going to have the ball in their court going into Thanksgiving weekend with all they needing to do. It sounds it sounds easier said than done. All they need to do is go win at Tiger Stadium against a Brian Kelly-led LSU team, with a team that's going to be pissed off, looking for revenge from last year. LSU is going to give them their treatment from last year. LSU is going to ruin A&M season, knock them out of the playoffs, knock them out of getting to Atlanta in the last year of the divisions. Bama beats Auburn. LSU beats A&M. Bama heads to Atlanta in the SEC West. I think the SEC in general, the SEC West specifically, is going to be crazy this year. Just, like I mentioned, the SEC West, 4 through 7 could go anyway. Throw them in a hat. It wouldn't shock me. Missouri, I think they're going to finally get it done, get those 8 wins this year. The SEC is going to be a blast this year. It's going to be a blast. But I still think it's Georgia's world. The rest of us are just living in it. But I appreciate you joining us on this episode. I mean, we got Chris Phillips, brought him in. All intel, anything you want, South Carolina. Go check him out. Spurs Up Show, the Spurs Up Show. Go check him out. Predictions. I give you any prediction you wanted in this league. Broke down every game by game. Every game that will be played in the SEC this year, we gave it to you. Again, Alabama winning the SEC West. Georgia winning the SEC East. Georgia is your college football, is your SEC champion. I gave you my playoff prediction. Who's going to win the national championship? We got Georgia as the 1 seed. Florida State is the 2 seed. Texas is the 3 seed. And Michigan is the 4 national champion. It's going to be Georgia. National championship game is going to be Georgia versus Texas. And the Georgia Bulldogs three-peat for the first team in modern era to three-peat. Hey, if not now, when? Kirby Smart and the boys' schedule sets up perfectly. But I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. This is one of my favorite episodes of the year. But again, we're going to keep bringing it to you. A lot of good guests coming in next week. Hey, one more Saturday away from SEC football, opening up Hawaii visiting Vanderbilt. And then we're 2 Saturdays away from Labor Day weekend, where we have some fantastic matchups. Everybody's rolling the ball out. But again, I hope you enjoyed this episode on Mock 10 Sports, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend.